All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second webinar of our Director's Cut webinar series. Today's webinar is titled, Here's Looking at You, Cam. We'll be covering how capital asset management can help you find better ways to minimize capital expenditures and operating expenses by maximizing the useful life of your assets. My name is Colleen Boucher, and I'll be acting as moderator for today's presentation. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a second, but before we do, I want to take a moment to introduce you to our host, Keith Leone. Some of you may have worked with Keith already, but for those who haven't, Keith has been with AssetWorks only a short while, but brings extensive experience in operational software. He is focused on the FleetFocus suite as a sales engineer and has primarily been working within FA and CAM. He will be a great resource for us today. Just a quick heads up before we get started, the microphones have been muted, so if any of you have any questions at any time during the presentation, you're encouraged to use the WebEx chat tool. You should all see the chat icon located on the top right corner of your screen, and this acts as an instant messaging tool. Feel free to send me questions throughout the presentation, and at the end during the Q&A, I'll relay them to Keith. With that said, I think we're ready to get started. Keith, why don't you take it away?
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. And again, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name's Keith Leone. I'm one of the sales engineers here at AssetWorks. So kind of just to get started, we're going to jump right into CAM, which is the solution we'll be focusing on today. Now, CAM is really the first and only product of its kind that's really just created for asset managers. CAM addresses all the back office roles and brings their data and workflows into one centralized application. And it's an application that's dedicated to managing the analysis, planning, procurement, and disposal of vehicles and capital equipment. Now, CAM allows asset management teams to more efficiently support their workflows and areas of responsibility, which results in a more centralized process. CAM is actually the only capital asset management application that can be integrated with any other maintenance system, which means no more spreadsheets or multiple databases to manage your information and any workflows that you might have. So today we're going to bump through a couple different slides and a couple different portions of the system. And just like Colleen mentioned, any of your questions, feel free to submit those and we'll address those at the end. Now, CAM was a customer-driven initiative, so all the functionality that you're going to see today was determined by our special interest group, which is actually made up of current customers. CAM is focused on added functionality that didn't previously exist, especially in one application, to control the entire asset management process from planning through disposal. Now, what we'll focus on, again, is some things like managing the purchase and production, receiving and assembling assets. And the primary focus for today's presentation will be on the analytics portion. Now, within the CAM concept, you can see here was actually designed with 4 main modules. That'll be analytics, planning and budgeting, procurement, and disposal. And these modules are all built around Data Mart or an asset register like FA, M5, or any other fleet maintenance system. Now, one thing that's important to mention as well is that CAM can also integrate with your purchasing application. And CAM is simply used for assets that are replaced. I mean, that can be anything from vehicles and equipment all the way to IT assets and even complex assets. Now, some of the things that asset managers use CAM to do would be based right here, and there's actually 8 main functions for those different roles. As I mentioned before, today we're going to focus primarily on the analytics portion, but there's also forecasting, we have planning, which gives you the ability to manage a multi-year replacement plan based on your selected criteria. We've got budgeting, ordering, production, receiving, where each user can actually see all of the unreceived line items and update VINs, what asset is being replaced, and any attribute information. And as you see there, we have a receive app where we actually give you the ability to take this process mobile through our smart app, where you can update attributes and then complete those user-defined acceptance checklists. And it just makes this a little bit more effective when you're on the go. And lastly, you'll see disposal. So disposal is where disposal steps can actually be managed and tied back to a lifecycle code. Now, the top 4 functions you see up there actually do require history from a maintenance system. but the bottom 4 are actually process-oriented functions. Now, within the data mart, you might be wondering, how do we get your existing assets into CAM? Well, within the integration, there's an actual interface that's created to push data from FA or M5 right into CAM. Any other fleet system you might be utilizing would be integrated utilizing a batch tool. Now, we do also offer a data loader, and this is actually part of the CAM application, but it's going to give you the ability to export or import data in a defined template, and it can create templates to load that data and import right into CAM. And this can be used for things like updating category parameters or a department reorg. Now, in CAM and FleetFocus, as you see here, we actually have the ability to push from CAM into your fleet management system. And we can move information like new assets, attributes, new specs or equipment types, even warranty terms and warranty profiles. But we also have bidirectional options where you can have anything that you change from codes to departments or locations moved from CAM to your FleetFocus or from your fleet management system back into CAM. So that's going to be that bidirectional communication that we offer right in the system. Now, what we're going to do from here is we're actually going to go ahead and jump into the analyze portion that we talked about. So this will be the focus for today. Now, as you see here, we've got Andrew, Analyst, over to the right, and the header there says, CAM helps Andrew do his analysis faster and makes his job much easier. So it's really an easy way for users to develop and run lifecycle models in the analytics portion. And since those models are actually already built and the data is integrated, it is literally push-button analytics. So you don't have to worry about extracting data, building models, and running those calculations. We're going to make it literally a click of a button. Now, 2 of the lifecycle cost model types that you would see here would be category reference and then custom. When we talk about category reference, these are actually going to be predefined parameters that will run consistently. And then when you jump into custom, it's going to actually allow assumptions to be changed as needed to refine those models. From there, we can bump into our mean equivalent annual cost, or the MEAC model. And that's basically just going to go in and find the optimal replacement point based on annual maintenance and then any operating costs. When we talk about cost trend models, you can see some of these graphs and charts as we bump through as well. The cost trend model is just cost analysis, which is going to group assets based on utilization to go ahead and find that optimal replacement point, and it's going to rank them using quartiles. Now, in our cost per use model, this is going to give you the ability to calculate the highest utilization and lowest operating costs, which again will find that optimal replacement point. So these are all going to be built right into the system for you. As that data populates, you can get in, view those charts, view those graphs, and you can see things like the maintenance, downtime, energy, and capital. Now, within our data distribution graphs, these will actually provide the ability to view costs over time graphically, and that's just going to allow you to better interpret the data and see those breakdowns over time. Now, from here in asset analysis, so the last few charts and graphs, they've been pretty high level, but it's definitely important to point out that CAM can certainly look at the broad view of things, but it also has the ability to really drill down to a very deep view. So, with CAM, we're going to give you the ability to see things not only from a macro level, but all the way down to a micro level. Now, with asset analysis, CAM actually will allow users to view individual assets and their costs on a monthly, yearly, or life-to-date basis. And it's going to drill into the costs of those individual assets as opposed to, entire categories in the models. When you see the life cycle profile, this just compares the individual asset performance to the asset's category average performance. And again, each of these comes with those different charts and graphs that make it really easy to digest over time. Now, in our replacement scores, we actually provide users the ability to weigh up to 50 measures and then rank assets based on a total replacement score. Now, all the scores are normalized from 0 to 100, so that just allows for consistent comparison and weighing. We'll scale all that stuff evenly. Now, one of the neat charts that we offer in the system is actually our radar chart for scoring. So this will show the importance of each factor in the replacement score. Now, the closer the factors are to the edge, the worse the performance, and hence a higher priority for replacement. So as we get into our defender and challenger analysis, this just gives you an idea of repair versus replace. This actually uses all the data to recommend, repairing versus replacement. Now, this is all going to be based on a cash flow model, comparing the unit to be repaired versus the unit to be replaced, and it's going to pick based on the least amount of cash flow. Now, the defender and challenger will really give you the ability to use the data in the system and take this to those different meetings that you might have. But what that's going to do is it's going to give you options to, really defend the decisions that you're making and back up those decisions with data. So all of these charts and graphs that we've seen, as we've gone through the system, are built to really make your life a little bit easier, but also to make these data points visual and give you access to bring them to the meetings that you need to bring them to prove those points that you're trying to get across there. So it again gives you a lot of options right here in the system. To summarize CAM, it's really the ability to accommodate the full life cycle activities of capital asset management to help those user workflows for, like we mentioned, analysts, forecasters, planning and budgeting, ordering, production, receiving and disposal within any organization. Now, I know the slides that we walked through today were primarily based on analysis, but there are 7 other functions within the system that we absolutely would love to show you at some point in time. But again, today was primarily focused on the analysis portion. So I definitely would like to open it up to questions as we kind of got through those graphs and charts a little bit quicker than expected.
Well done, Keith. Thank you so much for sharing all that information. It was really valuable, and I think it showed, at the very least, just a peek into all of the amazing functionality that CAM has. Clearly, it's a very powerful tool, and if we only just saw, one of the 4 main modules, I can't imagine what else it could do for a fleet organization. So we are going to open it up for some questions. We had a couple come through. Just to start, this is a couple slides back with the integration slide that you were talking about. Can you talk a little bit more about how customers can integrate their data with CAM? You mentioned it can pull in from FleetFocus, FA, M5, other sources, but talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how easy that can be for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have an interface that's created which will allow for pushing data from FA or M5 into CAM. If you're not using FA or M5, you do have another fleet system. That's all going to be done through a batch tool. But the data that we're bringing in through this integration can really be anything from, basic work order information for the purpose of capturing things like historical cost, dates, repair reasons, or even tasks. We can also pull in things like downtime. If you wanted to pull in fuel costs, we have those options as well. Usage, mileage, even capital repairs. All of those things can be brought over in the integration, and again, that's just scratching the surface.
And you mentioned that there was, there were some codes that go forward from CAM back into your fleet management system, and then certain asset types or pieces of data that will flow back and forth. You have a little bit more detail on that, just to explain some of what those options are.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about that bidirectional option, that's going to be things that are changed in both systems. So whether it's your fleet management system or CAM, whenever you update something, it's going to be changed in both. That's going to be things like codes, departments, and locations. And that's really just important because you don't want someone taking the time to have to go enter those things in both sides. and in both systems, especially when you can update locations very frequently or codes very frequently. Now, some of the other options that we're passing from CAM into a fleet system like FA or M5 would be those new assets, right? So as you're accepting assets into CAM, attributes, specs or equipment types, and warranty information, all that important stuff that you're going to keep in CAM and you're going to track in CAM that would be associated to those life cycles, well, you're probably going to want those over in your fleet system as well. So we literally made it super easy to pass that information directly into your fleet management system.
Wow, that's an amazing capability. Thank you for explaining that a little bit further. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and answer some questions about a different topic. So one of the questions that came through, and I think this is an interesting one, is what type of information is vital for CAM to work? So obviously fleet organizations produce massive amounts of data. What is really sort of the highest level type of data point that CAM functions off of to do this modeling and do this projecting out in the future?
Right. So CAM is, again, an application that's dedicated to managing the analysis, planning, procurement, and disposal of vehicles and capital equipment. So what we're going to want in the system is just the basics of those vehicles, capital equipment that you're looking to track. But again, that's going to give us more of ability to build out a centralized process, right? So as long as we have the basics, we can start building out those life cycle models, which will help all the way through the disposal of those actual assets. Now, from there, you might want to include maintenance records. You might want to include warranty information for those specific components or assets, which will help to kind of build out that view along the way.
All right. Well, we're going to keep moving along. You're answering these questions beautifully, and I just want to make sure that we get to all of them within the time. We don't want to go past, the half hour that we've promised people. We'll keep them for today. So we did have a question come through about the utilization of the product. Off the top of your head, Keith, how many of our amazing customers are utilizing CAM at this time? I have a number in my head, but I'm curious what you might know off the top of your head.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I'm actually not 100% sure on the total number of users or organizations utilizing CAM. I know we had this discussion at the Academy, but
yeah, no, I think that it's close to 25, which is a high percentage of our customer base. So, and these are large-scale organizations. CAM works best when you have, lots and lots of assets. So, we're talking national organizations or state DOTs that are utilizing it to its fullest. So, I think that that's really encouraging. And like Keith said earlier, many of these organizations were part of the special interest group in SIG, so they really helped drive the design of the product. All right, I'm gonna shift focus again on you, Keith, if that's all right. We're back to questions about reporting. Can you talk a little bit more about what kind of reporting is included in CAM or how that reporting works?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different reporting functionality built into CAM. We've got things like those cost trend models, which again is going to group those different assets together based on different types of utilization. And that's going to help you with that replacement point functionality. Obviously, a big concern in CAM is finding out when to replace your assets so you can, budget correctly and make sure that you're not wasting money on assets that might have needed to be replaced a long time ago. I think the real successful part about CAM is it takes you out of the spreadsheets that you might be building manually and helps you to really automate a process. Now, there's a long list of reports, within the system. Almost every view that you're getting access to is like a live report. That mean equivalent annual cost, right? Asset analysis, life cycle profiles, replacement scores, and then you saw the radar chart. That's just a few. Now, one of the bigger ones that we talked about at the end were things like the Defender and Challenger, where it takes all that data in and shows you your best options for replacement versus repair. And then we have things like our maintenance rate card, right? So that's going to talk a little bit more about estimated costs of maintenance over the life of an asset. And it'll help you to determine things like the usage or rental rates. And that's a pretty popular one that we run through. Another successful report that gets a lot of good feedback from our current clients would be our MRU report, maintenance repair units. And that's going to calculate resources needed by, number of hours required to maintain assets. and it'll take into account things like number of technicians, number of bays, and that can actually be filtered on things like maintenance location, right? So there's a ton of different reports in there. That's just a few, and the list definitely goes on.
All right. Well, that was a perfect answer. Thank you very much for explaining all that. Another customer wanted to know if CAM is able to pull data out of the motor pool module in FleetFocus. And I think I know the answer to that, but you're the expert here, so I want to make sure that you have the chance to answer. But is that the case? Are we able to pull that data in and report on that in CAM as well?
So with CAM, we actually have the ability to build out different templates to pull data in. As far as the motor pool goes, I'd have to figure out exactly what type of template would look like to pull that information in. But again, we are working right within those fleet management systems, so motor pool does kind of fall in line there. I would just have to find out a little bit more detail on what that template would look like. But Colleen, what do you think about that, or what do you know about that so far?
My understanding was that absolutely, we would certainly be able to pull that in, and like you said, that there's just an opportunity for customization of the template and what that would look like in CAM based on the customer setup of their motor pool and how the data is laid out. So I think I got it right, but like I said, you know better than me.
Right.
Okay, so back a couple of slides when you were talking about the repair or replace and being able to defend some of that decision making. Can you talk about what assumptions CAM uses to make a recommendation whether to repair or replace an asset?
Yeah, absolutely. So it utilizes that cash flow model, and in taking kind of into comparison that unit being repaired versus being replaced, it's going to utilize the least amount of cash flow. So it's going to look at the best way to remove that asset and any options or anything along the lines of what it will look like from a maintenance standpoint. How many work orders have been associated with it? Is it costing you way more money to bring that thing into the shop than just to take it off the road? And within that Defender Challenger, it's going to, again, give you a clean view of that. And you can do that for multiple assets to really give you almost that full encompassing view of that asset life cycle. And again, with the ultimate end goal of letting you know, hey, should this be repaired? Should it be replaced? How much more time can we get out of this vehicle versus how much more time can we get out of another vehicle? So it just kind of gives you the full view of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like it would be crucial information for any manager to know about the assets that they're managing in their fleet. Okay, so a question came through about the cost per use slide and the model that's being used there, and how thresholds are set for the highest or lowest cost parameter. So really the question is about, are those thresholds customizable? Meaning, are you, as an asset manager, are you able to set a highest cost threshold and a lowest cost threshold to sort of rein in what you want to spend or not spend on the cost of per use of a vehicle? Or is that data coming in from somewhere else, either maybe benchmark data from some other source?
Yeah, no, so that would be your data, right? So as an admin in the system, you'd be able to configure that stuff, and any of the data that we're pulling into the system will help to build that report. And with cost per use, right, so that's all going to be based off of the highest utilization and then the lowest operating costs, and with the end goal in mind, of course, finding that optimal replacement point. So you're going to be able to, again, configure that data as needed with the different information that you're pulling into the system. And then as an admin, you can kind of configure what you'd like to see and what it looks like with your assets in the system. Now, there's a lot of different variables for different assets, for different pieces of equipment, but of course, the things that will remain throughout all of that is utilization and operating cost and kind of finding the happy place there and then the lowest point for replacement.
All right. I think we have time maybe for just one more question. We had a question come in through about pricing, and we'll certainly be happy to follow up with you offline about that. Obviously, that's going to vary based on how many assets you have and what the scale of your organization is. But Keith, can you talk about how CAM is sold in that? Is it sold piecemeal, or is it sold as a suite of modules? How does that work?
So as far as the pricing goes, I focus primarily on the system itself, and I'm not 100% on that. So I don't want to answer incorrectly for anybody. I think that the account managers would definitely have a little bit more specific information on that. What I think, could be beneficial if you are interested in pricing, we can definitely have your account manager reach out, and then we can walk you through the rest of the 7 modules, right? So if you did want to talk a little bit about a demonstration to see that information, we'd be happy to set that up. But I think for each account manager, I think that they know better based on the pricing, because I'm not super familiar with that aspect of it.
Sure, no problem. And then I'm going to sneak in one more question that came through, if I can manage it. We have just a couple more minutes. So somebody had a question about their fleet specifically, saying essentially that they have an internal service fund, or an internal fund that they utilize for fleet payments. Is CAM able to track active budget or active money sources in maybe one of the different modules to then assign back to the cost of the life cycle of a specific asset?
So I think I heard the end of that correctly. So they wanted to track costs back to CAM pretty much?
From an active fund, so not just even a hypothetical cost per use, but this is how many dollars I have in my budget left for the year or for the month. Am I able to track and sort of reference that back within CAM based on the assets that are there?
Sure. So from the sounds of it, you might be tracking that in your ERP system, or if it's a fund that you just have tracked even in something like a spreadsheet, we could pull that data into the system and then allow us to track that against certain assets. Sure, yeah, that is something that you could absolutely track in CAM.
That's very exciting. I think that's going to be a huge value add for any customer that's looking to make sure that they can not just think about the hypotheticals 10, 15 years down the line, but what money do I have this month, this year to spend, and how can I best utilize that against the assets that I'm trying to manage. Okay, so I'm going to wrap things up there. We are a couple minutes early, but I wanted to make sure that we, kept to our promise of keeping everybody only a half hour. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. Keith, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. I have to thank you on behalf of AssetWorks. I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping that our customers have as well. We will be sending out an email in the next day or so with today's webinar recording, and there are 2 remaining webinars left in our series. So we will be talking about when Fleet met EAM next week with Tom Seaman, who many of you know. So please join us for that at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And then our final webinar of the series is with Deborah Wolf. She'll be talking with us about how to benchmark your data with our tool, Fleet Metrics. So we're very excited about the remaining webinars in the series. We will be emailing out today's recording as well as last week's recording if for some reason you weren't able to catch it and you want to watch it on your own time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Keith, for joining us. We'll be sticking around for just another minute or two, but that'll wrap us up for today. We hope you have a nice afternoon.